as her principal residence. However, declaring it her primary residence secured a lower mortgage interest rate. Look how far away that is, Tish. You're not going to drive down there. So the documents come out saying if she took actions, if that's true, she violated New York ethical rules, obviously. All of the New York rules of professional conduct, and she needs to be sanctioned accordingly. Big Tish gets hit with another bar complaint. We've already covered one coming out at her, courtesy of someone who's a local politician there in New York. But now America First Legal sending in another complaint to the Committee on Professional Standards. And Tish, who's now suspected of multiple various allegations of mortgage fraud, now under scrutiny for her law license as well. In addition to prospective criminal charges, let's take that law license away from her since she's a fraudster trying to scam the public by getting beneficial loans at everybody else's expense. So here's what America First Legal says. All right, we filed another bar complaint against Tishy following the DOJ criminal referral that went over. The complaint says she committed mortgage fraud spanning decades, falsified bank documents, and more. They said on April 14th, if you recall, William Pulte sent a letter over to Tish saying, you falsified a bunch of stuff. We've talked about it. She had the two main issues, of course. One was saying that a 5-bedroom property was actually 4 bedrooms, so she could qualify for a better loan. And the other story was about her claiming that a second property was actually a primary property, so she could get a better loan. Now, their criminal referral already laid out several things: wire fraud, mail fraud, bank fraud, false statements, and more. But in 2023, they saw this. America First says, James sought to purchase a home in Norfolk, Virginia, declared it would be her principal residence. Right there. I hereby declare that I, Big Tish, intend to occupy this property along with my Tish as my principal residence. Well, all right, we'll let you both move in here. So New York sitting AG, they say it's highly unlikely that she intended to move more than 400 miles away from New York to establish Virginia as her principal residence. However, declaring it her primary residence secured a lower mortgage interest rate. Look how far away that is, Tish. You're not going to drive down there. The referral also alleges that in 2001, she falsely reported to the federal government that the number of housing units in the building were different than what they were. Here's more documents on that, right? 5-family dwelling is what the property is, and it's really, she's been calling it a 4-unit building to get better loans that apply to 4-unit buildings and don't to 5. But in 2011, when refinancing, she reported that the building only had 4 units. Making it eligible for home affordable modification plans. More documents right there. She applies for it. Dwelling only, 4-family, busted, mortgagor. Letitia James. In 2019, when she referenced the property again, she reported that it only had 4 units, qualifying her for a mortgage through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. If it was 5, she wouldn't have gotten that loan. There it is again. So the documents come out saying if she took actions, if that's true, she violated New York ethical rules, obviously. Big Tish violated rules 8.4b. She violated 8.4c. All of the New York rules of professional conduct, and she needs to be sanctioned accordingly. America First says rules 8.4b and c say that it is prohibited to engage in illegal conduct that adversely reflects on the lawyer's honesty, from Tish, trustworthiness, or fitness as a lawyer, or conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, and misrepresentation. Can't do it. Rule 8.4 says so. Sorry, Tish, can't do it. As AG James herself has repeatedly said, there cannot be two systems of justice in this nation. No one's above the law. You're right about that, Tish, and you're now next. Says America First Legal urges the Committee on Professional Standards to investigate her, and here is what got sent her way. Over to the New York State Bar Committee on Professional Standards, referencing Big Tish James. They say, all right, this is America First Legal Foundation writing, and we're writing to file a bar complaint against the biggest Letitia James in all of New York, Tish James, the Attorney General. On April 14th, Pulte from Federal Housing sent a letter to Bondi and Todd Blanche saying that Tish should be referred to criminal prosecution, as we know. Now, as shown below, the evidence indicates that she filed false bank documents, property records, and more to get favorable loan terms. Now, while serving as the AG for the state of New York, she purchased a home in Virginia and said that she was going to make it her principal residence. This meant that she would live there in Virginia full-time. Can't do that through the AG in New York. Now, the obvious reason for making the certification, lower lower interest rate. Now, additionally, on another occasion, she said that there were a number of dwelling units and misrepresenting the number of units in the building that she owned. Also got mortgage refinancing at a much lower rate. And here's the truth. First, Pulte's letter shows that she purchased a home in Virginia through a power of attorney granted to Shamis. During the purchase, the documents say that Virginia would be James's primary residence. She got elected as the AG of New York in 2018. In 2022, James flirted with a run for governor, but instead of running for governor, decided to run for re-election and won. From 18 until present, she's been the elected AG of New York. Unlikely that she ever planned to be a full-time resident in Virginia, but caught it anyways and then got a nice fat loan on it. But then the second part of this is Bill's letter provides other evidence that Tish purchased a multi-dwelling unit with 5 units listed in the certificate of occupancy. It says, however, in 2011, she submitted an application for the Home Affordable Mod program indicating that it was a 4-unit building and not a 5, and she did that to get a better loan. These loans are capped, can only get them for 4 dwelling units. So she called it a 4, and the HAMP program was limited to 4 units. It appears that Tish misrepresented fraudulently the number of dwellings in her unit to get better terms. Now, as the New York Rules of Professional Conduct states, a lawyer is an officer of the legal system. That's you, Tish, who has a duty to uphold the law and to promote the administration of justice. Man, she has not ever done that. A lawyer should further the public's understanding, trust, and confidence in the rule of law, because in a constitutional democracy, legal institutions depend on popular participation and support to maintain their authority, right? This is legitimacy. This is credibility. When courts lose it, they lose their power, which is why what we're seeing happen out of DC right now is so problematic. Now, further, the legal profession is largely self-governing. The legal profession helps preserve the law from governmental abuse. If the government itself regulated the legal profession, the profession would lose part of its purpose, which in many ways is to challenge the government. Thus, lawyers are expected to observe the rules of conduct. Failure to do so harms the entire profession and the practice of law. So long as practitioners are guided by these principles, the law will be a noble profession. And then you get Tisha in here, get Fannie Willis, and they wreck the whole thing, going on cruises with their lovers. Any failure to comply with an obligation or prohibition is a basis for invoking the disciplinary process. And so here's what we say. The rules of professional conduct define fraud as the following: something that has the purpose to deceive. Letitia's material misrepresentations meet that definition and question her candor, her trustworthiness, and Letitia's honesty. If Letitia took actions that were alleged in Pulte's letter, she's in violation of multiple rules: 8.4b, 8.4c, and more. Conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, and deceit. Now, the New York bar, they write, you guys, a lot of people will ask, right, what can we do about Tish? Like, is she going to lose her license? Is she going to go to jail? Is she going to resign? What are the ramifications going to be? One avenue would be the state bar. State bar can regulate this, but I think this question got asked yesterday or the day before. If she's elected by the people and they want her in there like the people do, how is the bar going to override the people and take away her ability to practice law as the New York Attorney General? Hard to do that. So if those are true, while beyond a reasonable doubt, saying you at least should investigate it, right? The committee has the authority to begin an investigation on this complaint, and there is currently no other legal action or proceeding that this would be entwined with in New York. And so you, the bar, you're supposed to regulate us, should exercise your statutory authority and launch your own independent investigation into Tish. The legal profession ought to continue to regulate itself. A failure to do so would show that certain officials are above the law. And Tish got done lecturing us for 4 years about no. If James has engaged in fraud by deceiving her lenders, and it certainly looks like she has, and the government to obtain benefits, she's engaged in professional misconduct and she is subject to discipline. Now, Bill Pulte's letter identifies her intentional misrepresentation through her own declaration that she intended to occupy the property in Virginia. And at the time she declared her intent to make that her principal residence, she was the Attorney General in New York. Now, additionally, the year before that, James made this declaration. She also ran for re-election in New York and won. After serving less than a year in her new term, unlikely she's going to move to Virginia. There's no public indication she ever intended to move there anyways. And the New York Constitution says you got to be living here in New York for 5 years if you're going to be the AG. It requires her to live there. If she occupied Virginia, she would have failed to continue being a New York resident and would have been ineligible to hold her office. So she couldn't have moved without forfeiting her position. So if James was intentionally deceptive about making the home in Virginia her principal residence, if she intended to do that, she violated the rules of professional conduct. And if she did that to save some money, then it goes to her honesty, her trustworthiness. It's a crime of financial gain, of moral turpitude. And if the allegations are well-founded, then she's brought disrepute to the bar, which is true. She also takes her shoes off in court, as we know, which is disgusting. Additionally, Pulte's letter identifies her intentional misrepresentations through her repeated various mortgage applications or filings for government assistance, where she reduced the number of dwellings in a building she owns. If the building has 5 dwellings, as indicated in the actual certificate of occupancy, 4 dwellings, and her claims that it is 4 is fraudulent. It appears she has continued to make this misrepresentation to obtain financial benefits that she would not be entitled to. And Sam Antar went back through the records, and one of those buildings that she has, apparently it's a 3-story building. Abby Lowell said it was a 4-story building because he's an idiot, but it's a 3-story building, and then there were different family members living on each floor, allegedly. But on the second floor, where Big Tish was living, there were 2 electrical hookups, meters there, and they were saying, well, why would you have 2 meters on one floor if there are not tenants living in there? So it's in a 2A and 2B. And James's actions meets the definition of fraud. So she's actually, even a 5-unit building, she's splitting up into other, subdividing it and maybe renting it out to Airbnb, or she's storing her Tish in one section and air conditioning it. We don't know. Miss James and her actions meet the definition of fraud as defined under the rules of professional conduct, probably violating those rules as well. So in conclusion, in this bar complaint drafted by a brilliant Nicholas R. Berry, thank you, Nicholas, for holding her accountable, says Tish, as the chief legal officer of New York, she ought to aspire to the highest ethical standards. It appears she has repeatedly traded in her integrity for a monetary benefit of deceiving lenders for personal enrichment. This harms the rule of law, brings disrepute to the profession, and her conduct, if it's true, it means she's failed to uphold the letter and the spirit of the law and the rules of professional conduct, and she should be investigated immediately to determine if these allegations are true, and if they are, impose the appropriate discipline for you, Tish. As James herself once previously explained, no matter how big, rich, or powerful you think you are, no one is above the law. Signed by Nicholas Berry with that absolute hole-in-one, right in the hole, final sentence. Well done there. From Nicholas Berry, Senior Litigation Counsel. No one is above the law. Tish, you're in trouble. So, fun filing there. America First Legal, shout out to them. We'll see. Tish is scrambling around. In another video here, we covered Abby Lowell, his response to the criminal referral, and Sam Antar, White Collar Fraud's response to Abby Lowell. And this case is going to get fun. So we'll be here continuing to cover it. Thanks for subscribing and joining as we do.